welcome to the Open Door Initiative, a segment of On Purpose Planning and Consulting, where we're here to talk to various people with their different personalities, observations in life, perspectives, and they're just going to chat with me today around how they can be open to hear, open to learn, open to educate, and open to practical steps forward. So today, I have the special pleasure of welcoming Samantha Smith, Trisha Flag, and Weletz. And today we're going to focus on understanding the nuances and mindsets of our personal stories that affect our present day relationships, discussions, and families. So first things first, I want to hear from each one of you ladies, just a quick background, who you are, your family, what does that look like for you, and also, I would be curious to know, I think the listeners will want to know also, is where are you from? So I'll start with you, Sam. Give us a little bit of a background and 1, 2, 3, go.
Sure. I was born in Pittsburgh, raised in Harrisburg. I'm now a single mom of 2 biracial children, a 16-year-old boy and a 9-year-old girl. And for work, I'm an attorney and self-employed as well.
Awesome. How about you, Caroline?
I am Caroline Weletz. I was born and raised outside of Philadelphia. I went to school down in South Carolina, and now I live in Pittsburgh. And I am married. I have 1 son who is in our local Seneca Valley School District.
Okay.
And I work for a foreign-owned chemical and agricultural mega company.
Wow. I love it. Trisha.
Hello,
Hey.
I am Trisha Flag. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, but I tell people I grew up in Orlando because I spent all of my 20s there.
Gotcha.
I moved back to Pittsburgh just before I turned 31. I am married and I have 2 stepdaughters. One is in college and the other one is going into her senior year in high school.
Okay. Awesome.
And my husband and I own a business.
Yes. So you guys are business owners here in the great state of PA. One of my favorite places, Massage Envy.
Yes, Massage Envy Cranberry.
Yes, love that. So I want to dive right in. So my first question to you ladies, especially in our current climate, because I wanted to bring all 3 of you on because you have such vast different experiences, and I consider you guys to be thought leaders. You guys offer great perspectives that I feel like people should hear. So one thing, and I know me and Sam have been kind of talking about this offline as well. I want her to go first, but definitely you other 2 ladies can chime in as well. But Sam, if awareness is a key to helping make lasting change, especially in this climate, why do you think it's so hard for people to come into?
Ooh, I think, geez Louise. I think why do I think awareness is hard for people to come into? I think for a lot of people, it's hard to put yourself in other people's experiences, unless you walk through it yourself. I think it's hard to understand or see a different perspective if you don't know somebody or you haven't gone through it yourself.
I could definitely see that, but what about the concept of it's still happening? Just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I thought that was a very good point I heard on a different program the other Sunday. What do you think about that? That it's not, we can't just ignore the life happenings of the people around us or situations around us just because it hasn't personally happened to us. Is that, do you think that's a lack of empathy maybe, or?
I think it can be a lack of empathy or just a lack of experiences in general. I feel a lot of people that, if we're speaking about race specifically, if they haven't been exposed to different experiences, I really think it's hard in general to have that empathy if it doesn't affect you directly or someone you know directly.
Okay. What do you think, Carol?
So I think a lot of it has to do with you have to do some groundwork within yourself to be able to recognize what's happening. It's really easy to say, oh, that's never happened to me, so it doesn't matter. And it's a lot of people think, COVID is kind of a sham. They're like, I don't know anybody that has it. Well, in my mind, consider yourself grateful. That's a good thing. And so a lot of it is looking inside yourself and recognizing that, you might need to dig into some unpleasant areas of yourself and your mindset to really understand what other people are going through and what's happening. Just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it's not happening to someone else right now, or hasn't happened to someone else before. And that's tough because you have to admit that your experience is maybe so vastly different than someone else's.
That's a good point. What about you, Tricia? Those are two different viewpoints.
It's so interesting to hear. I feel that I think there's a lot of fear. I think I think one perspective might be if you open yourself up to seeing a different viewpoint, or to almost like this Pandora's box. Like you're like, wow, if I open that up, then I'm gonna have to deal with it. I'm gonna have to have an opinion. I'm gonna have to have a thought. And I do think a lot of people just have a lot of fear about going there.
What else you thinking, Sam? I see your wheels turning.
Yeah, well, I was going to say too, when I say experience, I don't necessarily mean it has to be the exact experience, right? So like traveling abroad really opened my eyes up to other perspectives. So I think I just mean experience is in life in general. You have to walk through something to maybe have empathy for somebody else who's walking through something different.
So that's an interesting perspective. Why does empathy require a qualifier? Isn't it a human emotion that people should feel in general?
No, I would say it's a learned emotion. I don't think it's an automatic quality we all just possess. I know my children, watching them grow up, they did not possess empathy in the beginning. They came out selfish. So it's something that I think that you have to either want to become or become through circumstances.
What do you ladies think about that? Empathy having a qualifier?
I will say I am not strong in empathy. But I recognize that. And my brother and I talk about it quite a lot. We apparently were raised differently than other people in polite society.
Yeah.
And thank goodness I have a brother, but we both recognize that, empathy was not instilled. For better, for worse, whatever, it doesn't matter. So I know that is a problem. And, when we went through small group at church, we had to decide like where we would best serve. And I immediately was like, nope, I have to serve somewhere where I am going to be forced to be the most empathetic person. I cannot be on the greeting committee.
Yeah.
I can't talk to people. I can't welcome them because that's what I would do naturally. And so I had to push myself. It is a problem.
That's amazing though. No, but that is so good that you recognized, and I think that's kind of
it gets thrown in my face a lot.
but it's good that you recognize that and that you took practical steps, right? in order to
I try.
yourself and to continue to learn about it, and you're able to self-reflect and have that awareness, like, okay, I need to show. And here's the thing, my spiritual gifts test, right? Mercy and compassion were definitely at the bottom, right? I understand what you're saying, because it's harder for a person like me as well to just say, like, okay, well, just get your life together, right? Okay, the name of one of my courses for my business, like, get your life together, like,
Get your life together.
Get your life together. So I do get that, but I, as you, am also taking those necessary steps to kind of dig in, because we have to have that compassion, that grace, that mercy, that ability to see people in their rarest forms, to see people at their lowest, to see people when they're at the bottom and they need someone to help pull them up, and to see their pain and to see how things are. And I feel like that's one of the things that is missing in this talk, in this country, in our churches, in our relationships, is that we want to blow by that, as opposed to saying, hey, I get it, I understand what's happening with you, or at least I can see what's happening to you, right? Having that acknowledgement, and then being able to help pull people through that and what that looks like. Trisha, how about you?
So I definitely don't feel that empathy needs a quantifier, need something. But I think often to experience empathy, we need, sometimes, I don't like the word qualifying it, because, empathy, but sometimes we need that example or that feeling or that open heart. So, yeah, sad to say, I feel like, oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear that? It's like
no.
Okay, good. Sorry. It was like a helicopter or something. I'm like a cat. Okay, sorry, I'll get back on target. What I was going to say, where I started to grow in empathy, because I'm, being that also, like, get over it. Come on, we're not victims, come on, get, type person, and having that just direct, bold, like kind of lack of empathy type response. Usually that was how I was. So I grew a lot in that. And one way that I think I grew in that is just through life experiences. When things started to get difficult for me, when I had a different life experience, I was finding myself much more empathetic to other people.
Yeah.
Much more, I just went through some crazy things. So I just feel like, just because of my own life experience, I feel like I'm just more empathetic.
Yeah, kind of what Sam was saying. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
So so how do you guys feel about, especially Carolyn, in the business you're in, because I'm in corporate world too, and Sam being able, working with cases, that you're in, and even Tricia, you being in the business world as well, small business world. Why do you think sometimes it's harder for people to address those small subtleties and those nuances that we know are not okay, but that we kind of just let slide, or the things that kind of perpetuate the non-inclusive and the non-diverse society that we currently live in today?
So, could you rephrase that question or give an example?
Yeah.
So
for example, some of those nuances and mindsets that people may have in the workplace of, well, they should dress this way, or they should look this way because it's more professional, versus, no, that's just what they, that's culturally, that's what they look like. Or, well, they should have did a better job at this if they just would have tried harder, versus trying to understand what's happening with people. Again, these nuances and these subtleties that continue to perpetuate racial issues, diversity issues, because it's not just, a black and white thing, but just these things that people quietly say, or say in that way that continues to perpetuate our issues we're having? Like, why do you think people don't speak up about it, especially when they know that was like not okay?
Oh, I will tell you.
Yes, I knew you, because I was like, she works in corporate world. Like, she knows.
I do work for a huge global conglomerate, and I will tell you that there's a lot of root cause analysis of why people don't speak up. But I would say that from what I've reflected internally, it's all based on fear. This is for the US specifically.
Okay.
If I do not have my job, I do not have health insurance. I cannot provide housing for my family. I cannot provide the basic needs for my family. Because in the US, everything is tied to employment status. I can't run the risk of losing my job, because I don't just lose my job, I lose my lifestyle. I lose almost everything associated with me. So if I am not a strong person, I don't speak up at work because I'm scared of losing my job, which on the surface you might say, like, you should always speak up. But there aren't those protections here. The government isn't going to step in and protect me if I lose my position for speaking up against a wrong, unless the government agrees that, oh yes, that was wrong. Like, that company was embezzling money, you're a whistleblower.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Right.
So when you look at what's happening now with protests, other people from other countries are constantly asking, why don't you have mass protests? Why don't you have organized? Like, why is this really the first time that it's happening? Well, this is the first time that everybody's off of work. And that's really and that's a lot of what's happening right now, is that across the country, people aren't tied to their employment because their employment might not be happening right now.
That's true.
But from a corporate perspective, for me, that's a lot of it. However, I do have some security in my job. I've been there for a long time, and I also have a very strong personality.
Yeah.
So I will speak up. I will say things, but that's a privilege that I have, and I recognize that. So someone just walking in, a 23-year-old young woman is definitely not going to feel free to speak her mind, versus me, someone just slightly above 23, has that longevity at the company and can say, like, hey, no, pump the brakes. This is not how this is going to happen.
Okay.
But I think a lot of it is fear.
That's good. Sam, what are you thinking?
So I would probably argue to say that, so that to me would be a small minority of scenarios. I would say where somebody's battling with, I really want to say something and I'm scared. I would probably say that most of these small nuances that are happening aren't even bothering someone enough to say, I need to stand up, or I should stand up, but I fear for my job. I would say on the whole that it happens so often on these small little levels since I was young that it doesn't hit me that hard to where I feel like something needs to be said. It doesn't like not sit right with my soul when I hear it. So it's just a matter of constant, it happens all the time. So it doesn't hit me hard enough to where I should make a stand right here.
Right.
Because it's just
becoming normality.
It's normal. So am I really going to make waves when this happens all the time anyways? What difference does it make?
So I like how I was listening to John Gray and Stephen Furtick, and they said that's what we have to look to get rid of, is that spirit of indifference. It's doesn't really, to your point, this is normal, this always happens.
It's got to pain you, because if it doesn't pain you, then you're not going to stand up.
Right.
So until it causes a pain.
That's so true. What you're thinking, Trish?
Well, yeah, I think oftentimes, I think what Carol was saying, like in a work environment, I think we are so, like, we're in a small business. It's, predominantly just blue collar, workers. And obviously we have a lot of HR issues. I think I just verbalized to you, Joanie, the other day about, an issue where someone was saying something real insensitive.
Yeah.
And so it ends up being a hostile work environment.
Yeah.
And it's something that has to be dealt with. We are blessed in the sense that we have, less than 40 employees. We're more of a family type environment. We have a lot of people that have been with us for years or since we opened, which is such a blessing. So when someone hurts, we hurt. So I think it's a little different in a small business type setting than it would be in a corporate setting.
Yeah.
Because when those feelings are hurt, everyone knows. So we have to bring it up and we have to have those conversations and figure out a way that we can get together. But I am certain that there are still people that don't speak up.
Right. So I even want to get into more personally with you three, outside of business world and just you growing up, and especially being from the area, East Coast, down South. What are the specific nuances or mindsets that were learned growing up that you experienced, and that you've kind of either unlearned or because of what's happening, with the heightened awareness that you've kind of caught yourself and had to kind of back down on those? What are some of those that you grew up with, Trisha, nuances or mindsets that you've had to kind of put in check or relearn or change here recently, or that you've done over time?
Yeah, so I grew up in like a lot of us in a predominantly white town. We didn't, there were definitely, this is Moon Township. I'm sure it's changed a lot, but out by the airport. And I had Black friends. I didn't have any Black female friends. There was a Black friend in the group. It was always a male. Why I have some ideas. I don't know. They would be like ignorant ideas, I'm sure, or assumptions. But it was, so there were still friends. We still had some, but it was obviously a minority. The white was the majority. I grew up, we never really never really talked about like racism as okay, this is a big problem. It was more, if the conversation came up at home, it was more, well, are we racist? Like, I never felt that I was. I never thought, I remember a conversation one time with my parents. I had gone to work. This is in my early, I think I was like 20 years old. And I went to work, and there was a man that was biracial that worked at the retail place I worked at, and he caught me off guard. He asked me if I am attracted to Black men, or that if I would date a Black man.
Yeah.
And he caught me such off guard. I thought it was a weird question, but I just responded to him, and I just simply said, I'm attracted to attractive men.
Yeah,
like, that's all. All I knew to say, so I don't, if they're attractive. And so it caught me in such a way that I went home and I asked my parents, I said, hey, just hypothetically, if I brought home a Black man or wanted to marry a Black man, how do you guys feel about that? I thought, why not ask a question? And so my parents right away said, well, we don't have a problem with that. We have no problem with biracial couples or anything like that. But they did add one thing, and they said we would be concerned for your kids. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Why? You know, like, why? And they said, well, we would be concerned that they would be picked on, that they wouldn't feel like they would have a place. And that was the first time I ever thought, oh, well, that's interesting. So it wasn't like they don't, you know, they didn't care about the biracial, but they were concerned of what could, what their grandchildren hypothetically could go through from their perspective, you know, growing up in Philadelphia and from their perspective. But that was one of the conversations I remember growing up.
How about you, Carolyn?
I think it's fair to say that I'm definitely still learning the nuances. I mean, I have not yet fully evolved. No, I'm still learning it. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and a lot of my time growing up and in high school revolved around music and rowing. And so I was naturally in a small group of people. And what I will say, and I don't know if Sam experienced this, but Pennsylvania has a huge amount of hate groups.
Yeah.
And growing up, I knew a lot of way too many people. I knew a lot of people that were openly presenting as like Nazi skinheads.
Wow.
I wasn't friends with them, but I knew them, I saw them, and I think it's really like the music that I listened to kind of drew that crowd. So I knew a lot of these people.
Okay.
And it took me quite some time to realize that Pennsylvania was really hate-filled, and that wasn't normal. It wasn't normal to have like 5 Nazi skinheads at your high school. Like that wasn't what was happening in other parts of the country. And it was always
so you're saying your school like let them like outwardly like walk around?
So I mean, you're constantly evolving. So here, let me share.
Wow.
It's not this is something, and this is actually like completely topical. Last year there was an article in the city paper about it here in Pittsburgh about female tattoo artists, like the top 20 female tattoo artists, whatever, in the Pittsburgh area. And the woman that they chose, not necessarily number one, but the woman that they chose kind of for the picture of their cover story, I looked at her and I said, oh my gosh, she's wearing a Nazi punk band t-shirt. And I sent them an immediate message. I was like, you have got to pull that, like it while I understand that you didn't know who this band was, I do. You've got to pull it. Like, and so there's a lot of symbolism that unless you knew what it was, you wouldn't know what it is. So there's just different ways to present. And of course, because I knew what to look for, I knew what they were, but I mean, they're not people, they're not my friends. They're not people I would hang out with, but I definitely knew looking at them, hey, I can tell by your shoes, by your laces, by your shirt, by the band logo that you have on, by your 88 tattoo, I know what you're about, and I know I don't need to know you. So I don't know outside, and that to me was something that was like, as I got older, I kind of thought that everybody had to deal with something similar to that, of having that friend group. And I guess on my side, from my personal perspective, these are definitely white kids that are doing this. They're uneducated white kids.
Right. Wow.
But that's just from my history. But the city paper last year just didn't do research, didn't know.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's a story. I'm definitely learning so much just now. Like, Sam, what about
not a good one.
Not a good one, but wow, that is very interesting to even know that, because to your point, I would have never known that. I would have just looked at the cover and was just like, oh, okay, like, great.
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know. Sam, growing up in an area nearby, what was that looking like for you growing up, and what did that look like?
So I guess I have a completely different experience.
Yeah, we want to hear all. Yeah.
So Harrisburg actually, Harrisburg actually is a lot more diverse than Pittsburgh. So I went to school with a lot of Spanish people, Puerto Ricans, there was African Americans, and we all kind of blended in. It wasn't until I came to Pittsburgh that I noticed how segregated the Pittsburgh area is. And then on top of that, Cranberry even more so. That was not my experience. I grew up in Harrisburg. It was more diverse. My cousin, who's the same age as me, was biracial. So I just had a different experience coming up.
Yeah, and even having biracial children, you mentioned, and even I know Tricia has biracial nieces and nephews and people in her family. What does that experience look like for your children? Like, what are, especially even being here in Cranberry, here in PA, what does that look like for them, and what are some of those things you experience?
It's been difficult.
Okay.
Specifically for my son, and I think that's more to his age. I think, younger elementary, it's less, and then, middle school, high school gets a little worse. But yeah, he's been called racist names on the school bus. He was faced with racism in his school from his peers. And then we had some issues with him, and we've even experienced it in the judicial system. So I mean, yeah, we've had a lot of experiences with it. In fact, even the school he goes to, which is predominantly white, I remember, I don't know if it was the first year we were here, it might have been the first year, they wanted him to help come up with the Black History Day project. I'm like, really?
Those are the nuances that I'm talking about right there.
Is he being paid for this effort? Like, is that his job? No.
People to even ask. My son, he doesn't have a connection with the African American side of his family, or not a large one. Right. So I raised him. So he's going to know what I've taught him. And he's not an expert on, I mean, really, if that's who you're going to as your expert for Black History Month, you've got bigger problems. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's something that I know I'm specifically trying to work with. I know I've talked to a couple of friends, like, I definitely want to work with the school system on, we've got to address the gaps. Like, we have major gaps culturally. And again, it's kind of like Carolyn, in the corporate world where I am in dairy, a lot of the places and plants are out in the middle of nowhere, and I can't expect for half of the plant population to be Black or Mexican or Latino or whatever, because they just don't live in the area, right? That doesn't make sense. And I know since I've moved here in Cranberry, which is now 4 years ago, I would say the population is getting larger and larger for African American. I've seen it's starting to grow. Where I used to could probably go all week and not see too many other Black people I didn't know from church. Now regularly I see on an everyday basis, which was not the case. So I do think that it is prime time for the school systems around here to start to address that, because the gap is going to get larger and larger for being more diverse and being more inclusive. So that's going to be a big deal. Tricia, what about with your nieces and nephews? I mean, is that, Have they always been in the family, or were they adopted in? What does that look like for you? Is that something you were already used to or had to get used to?
So, I have a cousin in Philadelphia that adopted a little African baby, a little baby. She's, oh my God, she's so much fun, but I don't know how old she is now, 10 or 11. I don't see her very much at all there in Philadelphia. But as far as my nephews, my sister-in-law and brother, they have 4 biological kids. They decided to become foster parents, and they ended up through fostering. They had 2 brothers that came. They fell in love with them. Long story short, they ended up adopting the 2 brothers, and then they now are fostering 2 more boys that they intend to adopt, which are actually they're all brothers, and so we have 4, and I believe, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure they're biracial in the sense, I think their mother is biracial, but I think their fathers are not biracial or black. So they would be more black than white, I think.
Yeah.
Not that it matters. But they are in Swickley. So it's like pretty white. Yeah.
Eyebrows raised. If we had that here, they won't be able to see your pictures because it'll just be this slide, but that was funny. Audience.
Yeah.
You can't see that.
Yeah. So, I mean, even my sister-in-law is like, we had a conversation which was so great, like what's happening now. So we were just on vacation together, and they're precious young kids with a lot of energy. I need a nap afterwards. I don't know how they do it, but but I'm glad being the aunt and I get to check out. It's really nice. But I was able to have a conversation just one-on-one with my sister-in-law, and she recognized that there's an issue. That she needs to have black friends. She needs her boys to have black friends. She actually herself, on her other side of the family, has 2 black. She has a niece and nephew that are black on the other side of the family. But I think they live like an hour apart, so I don't think they see a lot. And there's an age difference and stuff. But so she was talking to me, and just right away, she was like asking for help. So that door opened really easily, and but she definitely recognizes the gap and the need there.
Yeah. So I know that can definitely be hard, especially in the different places that we live, because as much as we like to say racial issues don't exist and it's not really happening, it's clearly that it is, even here in 2020.
Yeah. She moved. That's right. They were in the village in Swickley, and she knew. She said, they're looking at me different. They're looking at my kids different. There's a lack of sensitivity. I remember when John and I were there, he had my little nephew, and he said someone walked by, and you could just sense the I don't want to call it racism, but it like, because I don't think it was blatant, but the uncomfortability, the ignorance, it's racism, and and so they moved actually out of the village, but they're still in the Swickley area. They would be still part of the Quakers Valley School District.
What are you saying, Sam? Yeah,
I was just going to mention 2 things. So one, so my kids, they get racism from white people, but then they also get comments from black people as well. So we kind of are lucky enough to get racism remarks from both sides.
Yay!
And even out here, they still get that, even with the small African-American population that is out here, they've experienced it from both sides. And then in addition to that, you mentioned about how now the population is becoming more diversified and there's a need now for that education. I would argue to say, even without the diversity, there's a need for education on cultural differences, period.
I agree with that. I just know now they'll be more apt to do it because they see that
right. It would be more supportive for the children that are now here, yes. But on a whole,
I agree with you. Yeah, definitely. Well, for one, I mean, and listening to the other podcasts, when you get a chance, just to my one with my family, they need to change the school books altogether, right, to include our true American history. So many pieces are left out. And to your point, Sam, they would already get it if we actually put American history in the American history books. So that's part of those things that need to change, is even the textbooks and how we're teaching and what we're teaching, and even understanding from a diversity standpoint. I know I constantly, especially not until college, because I grew up and didn't even actually realize, so I was having that conversation with my family. I grew up in actually a predominantly Black neighborhood and school, even though there were some other minorities and white kids that went to our school, but for the most part, the majority was Black. So I technically didn't even get a chance to be around white folks being the minority, being the majority, until I went to college. So I actually didn't even, to Sam's point, I didn't experience like vast racism or any of that until I was older. So it was a lot different for me. And I think the way that I even interpreted it up until now was I didn't view it as like my parents, like my mom and my aunt that talked about it on the podcast. They experienced it when they were young, they were kids, so it affected them. They were hurt and experienced pain in ways that they carried throughout life. I, on the other hand, because I didn't experience until I well knew who I was, and I kind of had a grounding in myself, it didn't really affect me in the way to where it was something that I held on to like a child would hold on to. So it's just so vast, even in the Black community, what this looks like. And I think that we have to approach it in that cross-functional way. We can't put it in a box and say, here's the box solution, right? Even for the schools, like, okay, here's your kit. It's like, go roll it out. That's just not how it's going to work. And I think that this has to be an ongoing conversation, which is why I wanted to hear from the different perspectives of you all today. And I did have another question as we get ready to wrap here shortly, is, do you think that there's any stereotypes that you carry today, or that even in your families, that you kind of see continue even today, that kind of hurt the process of change? That, because I had some friends that I've been talking to through this whole situation, and I talk to them on a regular basis now about it. And I even talked to them this past, it was a weekend or two ago, where for the first time, because they've now come into awareness about some of these things, they noticed it at a family outing and called it out, and they got flack for it. Like, it was, they kind of were taken aback by the reaction for saying something that was just, as I heard earlier, normal behavior, quote unquote, and just things that we've always said. Do you feel like you can now speak out when you hear those stereotypes, those nuances freely, or do you still think that those are things you'll hold back on, especially if it's around family? Carolyn, what do you think?
My family's really small, and they're dying off. actively. Lord. I know, it does sound terrible. Again, no empathy. So mostly I have my brother, and I mean, he doesn't.
We're even friends. I mean, it's good.
Yeah, he doesn't give a poo-poo. And my son is younger. He is extremely white. He is 7, and so my current group of friends is a lot of women with young children.
Okay.
And oh my, they would like to change the world. Okay. In every direction.
Okay.
And that's overwhelming at times.
Yeah.
It's a little overwhelming. But I have a pretty aggressive and boisterous personality. So when I hear something, I'll automatically say something. And lately, we're all a bit bored at home. And so what has been happening is that I joined, there's like this Facebook group, and it's called like Watching Racists Lose Their Jobs and Laughing at It.
Oh, Lord.
And so that has become a bit of a fun pastime for me. Okay. And I have noticed that like in a lot of our local groups, whether it be like Mars forums or Cranberry forums or something, a lot of people are spending a lot more time on Facebook, and for some reason they feel like it's okay to write things. And I have been annoyingly challenging them, and I'll reply like, "Oh, I don't understand. What do you mean? Really, like, just come right out and tell it to me."
Yeah.
So, but that is, I don't have a problem speaking up. My husband was raised in Pittsburgh, and his dad was raised here, and he is not as
vocal.
No, that's not what I want to say. He is not as friendly as I am. Okay. He's not as respectful.
He's not as tactful.
He's yeah, sure, let's go with that. And so he'll say things, and I'll immediately, you know what, Bob? We don't do that. Yeah. That's not something that we say. Let's talk about it, and I'm going to explain to you why.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm just not, I don't have that fear of speaking out, and I'll speak out against strangers, I'll speak out against friends, but also, I mean, I don't really need negative people or really racist people. I'll try and engage in a conversation, but I'm not going to maintain a friendship for my life and just be like, oh, that's my racist friend. Gotcha. It's okay. No, that's not cool. I don't really need that. But I don't have a ton of friends or a ton of family. So
we need to start a group just for you. We're going to Sam's going to join your group.
Caroline, her family's dying off. She needs a new family.
Her family's dying off. We need to get her.
We are not fertile people. We do not have, I don't have a ton of cousins. I have 2 cousins. Okay. I have like a niece.
And that's it. It's a wrap.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sam, I know you don't have trouble speaking out, but have you found yourself speaking out more lately?
No, it's the same. But I will give an answer that might not be popular. I'm gonna say it depends. So you gave a family example. Now I don't have an Uncle Larry, but if I did, and if Uncle Larry was racist, I might have the conversation with him, or I might not. Some people you're just not going to change. Now, if he says something in front of other people and we can use it as a learning experience, then it's worth my time. But if it's just me and Uncle Larry talking and he says something racist, I mean, some people you're just not going to change, so I'm not going to waste that energy. I mean, more than likely I'll have that conversation with them once, but I mean, some blatantly racist people are just going to remain that way, and I don't need to, nothing I say is going to change that. But again, I guess it depends on the situation. If other people are around and by me saying something, the other people will learn something, then yes. But if it's just Uncle Larry, he's probably going to stay that way.
Okay.
Uncle Larry's not invited to Christmas next year.
Or the cookout. Or the cookout.
Or the cookout. Uncle Larry is not coming to the
You
cookout.
don't invite him, but I'm just saying, when he shows up, which he inevitably does.
He's carrying his own beer.
Right.
We're going to put Uncle Larry in the corner. Trisha, what about you? Are you finding yourself having to speak up more lately, or feel like you should be? What's that look like for you?
You know what? I think that I'm finding myself, and this is just, I'm willing to speak up when I know
You're breaking up.
One,
You
that
to a bad place. I can't hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Around.
Sit better in here.
Yes.
You hear me better?
I can hear you now. Go ahead, hon.
Okay. So I was just saying that I've definitely have come to a place where I'm learning more to listen. I'm learning to just soak in. I feel like this is a whole education time for me. But the cool thing about that is I have noticed a shift in my heart. And that new sensitivity and that new empathy isn't just reserved to one side. So in other words, what I mean by that is I'm seeing like, okay, wow, I don't know everything I thought I did. And there is an issue here. And these right now, where I see is the women in my life are affected. And I love them enough to say, let's have a conversation. Let's get together. Teach me so I can understand. And on the same note, I find myself still having this empathy for, or I should say patience, not really empathy, but this patience for ignorance, for just lack of understanding or lack of knowledge. So when, so I had an incident just this past weekend. We were hanging out with some friends, and some conversations, came up that in the past I wouldn't have thought anything about, different political things or things. And I didn't think, but this time it was different. I just felt in my heart like, okay,
it's your time.
This is something to speak up. But instead of like, I didn't pick a fight, because like Sam said, I mean, if there's just some people that just won't change, but I didn't perceive this to be that case. These are close friends of mine that I know have good hearts and are good people. So I just gave, like, all I did is share like personal testimony, like, this is just kind of how I feel about it. And I'm seeing this other angle, and I'm starting to see this. And they were like, wow, that's an interesting perspective. So I do find myself being able to I just haven't been around a lot of people lately, honestly. But I do feel, as I get educated and as I learn to listen, I feel like those conversations will happen just naturally in a loving way. And I'm not gonna waste my time. One, if it's someone that I know just doesn't have ears to hear, I'm not, because it's just gonna frustrate me and it's just gonna cause more division.
Yeah.
And two, I lost that last. Two, I was gonna say, if I do hear something blatant, like that, I know, like, hey, that's wrong. I sure hope that I'm able to have that witty comment or that bold statement or something.
Okay.
But
that's awesome. And that's exactly what this whole initiative is about, right? It's not that I'm trying to push off onto you X, Y, or Z. It's just, hey, let me tell you my testimony and what that looks like for me, in hopes that by sharing your perspective, others may be able to come into some additional understanding, or that they have a change of heart, change of mind, change of mindset. So that's amazing. And the last thing that I always ask is, I want to know, what are practical steps forward that you're personally wanting to do or are doing in order to make lasting change, right? Because here's the thing. Once the protests go away and we don't hear this, it's not in the timelines anymore, it doesn't mean that racism automatically just went away just because people stopped being on the streets. So how do we have that sustainable change? And I want to hear from each one of you, and I'll start with Sam and then Carolyn and Trisha. What does that practical step look like for you?
All right. So for me, I think change happens through relationship. So at the moment, I'm trying to create opportunities for people to create relationships and just either start these conversations and or just by working together. So I've reached out to a church, and I'm probably gonna have to reach out to another church that's in the city. It's predominantly African American church, to see if there's opportunities for a lot of white people that have reached out to me saying that they want to do something, don't know what to do, see if I can plug them in there. And then that way I feel like by serving that church and or serving alongside that church, we create these opportunities for relationships and or to have these important conversations.
Nice. Please let me know, and I'll let other people know that too once you
Yeah, it's still in the works. They haven't gotten back to me yet, but I'm gonna make it happen. We'll see.
Nice.
For me, I think one of the things that I'm really trying to focus on is my son. He is the whitest of white little child. He is in a school district that is predominantly white, living in a very white neighborhood in a white part of the state in a white area. And I was really cognizant of that when I moved here, and because this isn't how I grew up.
Yeah.
And so my number one priority is ensuring that he doesn't grow up thinking that this is normal, that this is the way that most places are. And so that is, I'd love to tell you that I'm going to affect some serious change at the local school district and at the level, but
no,
that
it starts
that,
and it's your home. Yeah.
I mean, I would love to tell you that. But realistically, going through and doing things like, I have to start at a micro level. I talked to I had a lot of visibility into what he was learning this year because he was learning it in my house. The books that they were reading were awful. Yeah. And I say that with absolutely no educational background. I do not have a degree in elementary education, but obviously towards the end of the year, they felt that they needed books with more diversity. And I thought that the books were so pandering and so awful. And but at the same time, I don't have better books to offer them, but the books that they gave were terrible.
Yeah.
And that was something that I spoke with his teacher about, like, hey, can I do some research and try and get you something better, because these were terrible and they're perpetuating stereotypes that are not necessary to introduce. So trying to work on that small change to hopefully see bigger changes down the line. But that's something I would really, really like to do.
That's good.
And I recognize that he is the whitest of white child in this real white area. And I'm trying.
He's coming over on Joanie's house.
Well, yeah, and also making sure that he sees visibly, like, his mom doesn't put up with that. His mom isn't like that. You know, his friends shouldn't be like that. He should be empowered to speak out when he sees something, and he should be empowered to say, no, that's wrong. Yeah. So trying.
That's good.
It's I've got 18 years.
There you go. You got time.
I'm working it.
Work it. That's right.
Work it.
Work the plan. Trisha?
Well, I am having some friends over that have darker skin than I.
They have more melanin.
More melanin, yes. But that's a God thing. I was just so thankful that it just happened to happen so organically. And I didn't have Black women as friends in my life. And then I get involved at Victory, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, look here. I have these incredible women in my life. So as you well know, Joanie, I invited some of you over, just a few, because I know there's a lot more that I know and want to get to know. So I am looking forward to a great conversation, educating conversation. So I feel like that's my step, is personal education.
Yeah.
And like you guys both said, it is just building relationships. I know Sam, you said that. I know Carolyn, you're like recognizing this need and building these relationships. I just feel like we cannot effect change outside of meaningful relationships that you grow to trust and to love one another within. And so that's the start. And I know it's not going to be the end. I know that will not be the last conversation. And I do believe more and more women of all kinds of different backgrounds and diversity will grow to be a part of it. And I'm excited what's going to grow from just relationships.
Yes, that is so exciting. And I just want to thank all three of you ladies for an amazing conversation today. I learned a lot, got some new perspective on things. And I just appreciate you taking the time out to share with others what I think will be great conversation, to even start within their own friendships and their own relationships and their own families, and great next steps for each one of you that are personal, because that's what it has to be. This is a personal heart change that everybody has to walk into. So thank you once again for joining us. Look for On Purpose Planning and Consulting on all of the social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Like the page, set that notification bell on so you can get each and every episode that we drop. And it seems like we're dropping week to week. I'm doing pretty good here, but it might drop off. So look, let me not put out no expectations, but definitely remember that On Purpose Coaching, where we challenge you to do better on purpose.
Thank you, Joanie.